And when we're not hustling, we believe that seeing sex workers as full people outside of our work is an essential step toward humanizing and destigmatizing the industry and those who work within it. Help us to bring you the stories of the people behind the fantasies. When We're Not Hustling is a 501c3 fiscally sponsored nonprofit project of the Social Good Fund. Thank you for considering a tax-deductible recurring contribution. All contributions will be received through our fiscal sponsor, the Social Good Fund. You can contribute at nothustling.com.
Put away the lingerie. I wanna know you. Tell me more. I don't care about the hear about you and see the world from your point of view. The coffee's already made, so I'll part the shades, just pull up a chair and tell me more.
Welcome to When We're Not Hustling, a podcast where sex workers talk about everything but. I'm your host, Jessie Sage. When We're Not Hustling is a weekly podcast that explores the lives and identities of sex workers outside of our work personas, our personal philosophies, ambitions, families, relationships, passions, spirituality, and so much more. We talk about our lives beyond the job, asking, what does the flexibility of sex work allow us to do, and who does it allow us to be? On our show, we learn who sex workers are outside of the work we're known for. When We're Not Hustling is an exploration of the people behind the fantasies. When We're Not Hustling is brought to you by Assembly 4. Assembly 4 is a collective of sex workers and technologists working to bring the overall cost of sex work down through their advertising platform Tryst.link. They also educate clients through the Good Client Guide and provide resources and articles written by and for sex workers. Assembly 4 caters to all genders and demographics and raises funds to fight for sex worker rights and against exploitation in the industry. Learn more about Assembly 4 at assemblyfour.com. Welcome back to another episode of When We're Not Hustling. I am very excited to bring you an interview with guest Delphine, who is a full-service sex worker in the San Francisco Bay Area. Before we do that, I want to remind you that on Friday, we will have a episode of After the Hustle, where we talk about this episode, and Emily Foster, the producer, and I will be joined by Pucks Aplenty, and we're going to discuss polyamory, which should be fun because all three of us, Pucks Aplenty, Emily, and myself, are in non-monogamous relationships. So it should be an interesting After the Hustle. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about this episode. Delphine, who's a full-service sex worker, discusses the complexities of navigating relationships within the sex industry, and she particularly focuses on polyamory and non-monogamy. Our dialogue explores how sex work has allowed for creative expression and personal growth, while also addressing the challenges of hierarchical relationships and the importance of setting boundaries. Delphine shares her journey toward identifying as solo poly and the significance of finding balance in both work and personal relationships. So I am very excited to bring you this interview. By way of introduction, Delphine is a hairy, all-natural escort in the SF Bay Area. She loves engineering creative photo shoots, watching and rewatching science fiction, especially dystopian science fiction, and making fantasies come to life. That we share. The fantasies part, not the sci-fi part. She has been in the adult industry in various forms for about 15 years and has been doing full service work as Delphine for the past 7.5. She considers her 870 plus day Duolingo streak to be one of her greatest achievements. An AI bot once described her as a digital darling serving sass with a side of self-awareness and dad jokes. And that sounds about right. So let's dive right into that interview. Hi, Delphine. It's so great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited too because we're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is like relationships and how people navigate their relationships. And I feel like there's like an extra layer of complication to that in our industry when we're also like navigating relationships as a job. So I thought it would be fun to kind of dive into that with you. Last season, we had Jem DeMilo on, and she was talking about being a single person in the industry and what like her life looks like after choosing to be single. And going in the opposite direction with you and talking about being a poly person. So not just having a relationship, but having like multiple relationships. But before we dig into that, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Delphine. I'm a full service sex worker in the SF Bay area.
Mm-hmm.
I love science fiction. I love taking wacky photos. I have this wig wall behind me.
I was going to ask you about that. Do you wear a lot of different wigs for work?
I don't wear them for work, but in the past I've done quite a bit of like cosplay for my photo shoots, and
fun.
They're all the different character wigs that I've worn.
Nice. What characters have you been?
So I'm like, I have to look at the wigs to see. Morticia Adams.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
I've done Laura Palmer.
Wait, who's Laura Palmer?
Twin Peaks.
Oh, okay. I never watched
that
show.
I did her in the Red Room. Oh, okay, yeah, it's pretty good. The new one is pretty good, but the old one is also pretty good.
That's what I've heard.
The old one's very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done Caprica 6 from Battlestar Galactica. I did
fun.
Jessica Jones.
Oh, Jessica Jones is a good one.
Yeah, I did Dana Scully from the X-Files and probably a couple other ones.
Oh, she's the favorite of everybody's.
Yeah. Same.
Did you read, do you know who Juniper Fitzgerald is?
Yeah, I'm familiar with her from social media.
Yeah, she wrote the children's book that featured a sex worker, but she also wrote a memoir called Catch Me in My... I'm not going to miss this. I'm going to mess it up, but something about like Fall to My Ruins or Catch Me in My Ruins or something like that. But it is letters to Scully.
Oh, that's really cute. I have to look that up. Wow,
yeah,
are you kidding me?
It's like, well, like to Gillian Anderson, but like as she played that because she was such a fangirl as like a young person in her like a tween and teen. And so the memoir goes back and forth with like these fangirl notes that she wrote that were in her journals when she was young. It's very cute.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm going to have to look her up and find that. Thanks for telling me about that.
Yeah. So have you always done like, or are you into like cosplay? Have you always done sort of cosplay?
I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm really into cosplay, like in terms of doing it like for fun. But when I became an escort, I was like, oh my God, finally I have like a reason and the money to do like every like creative weird photo shoot that I've ever wanted to do. And so I at times just let my freak flag fly in that way. And also like, you know, if a friend has some kind of theme party, I really like to like dress up to the theme. So it's kind of more a love of like creativity and play than necessarily specifically cosplay.
Yeah, I love that.
But
and
I do like to do it.
It's very much in theme with this show because one of the things that are a theme that keeps coming up over and over again with every single guest is like what sex work has allowed them to do. And it sounds like that's really similar for you, where like you started doing this job and suddenly you're like, I have money and time and like a reason to do fun things that I wouldn't necessarily prioritize in other lifestyles.
Totally. I mean, sex work has enabled me to do like it's like makes me a little emotional. Like it's enabled me to do like everything that I do.
Yeah.
I've been a sex worker for like 15 years in different capacities. I've been doing full service for like 7 years, but it's like everything. I have time to like take courses that I want to take, like for fun, just things I want to learn about. Earlier this year, I became a yoga teacher, and so I teach
that's
like
fun.
2 yoga classes a week, and it like pays like really terribly, but like it's really,
It doesn't
I really
really matter.
enjoy
It's
it.
just for
So it's
you.
like
Yeah.
I can do it. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, I noticed some of the other people in the studio are like stressed about that aspect of it,
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I feel that way with like writing some art, like some of the articles that I write and some of the speaking gigs that I do. Like, I feel like those are things that I would be really frustrated about the pay for if I didn't have like sex work off, balancing that, where I'm like, the nice thing about this sex work job is that I can work for the weekend and then have the whole week to do low paying like the other kinds of things that I want to do that just are fulfilling to me, but I could never pay my mortgage doing.
Totally. Yeah. That's awesome. I'm glad you get to do that.
Yeah. On the other hand, it's funny because it's also given me like boundaries to be able to like ask for what I want to. So even if I like sometimes, for example, I was thinking about this the other day. I go to the med school here in Pittsburgh. I've given several like talks to students at the med school for free. Like they're not paying me to do that, but just to help new sex workers learn like our new medical students rather like learn how to best treat and talk to sex workers, which seems like a really good thing to do because they don't learn anything like that in school. And so I'm like, I can do that for free for you guys because I believe in the cause and I don't really need the money. But when they were like, oh, we need some like slides and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to I'm not making you slides. I will come and I will do it, but you're not even paying me. So like, I'm not writing a formal presentation, so there's actually like freedom on both ends to both like set the boundaries that you want and learn how to do that, but also to like make some concessions if you just want to.
No, for sure. I really feel like sex work is so good for like teaching people how to set those boundaries really strongly. Also,
yeah. Well, I had you on because I wanted to have a poly sex worker and particularly a poly full service sex worker because I feel like that's I've done also I'm a full service sex worker primarily, but before that was an online sex worker. And I felt like there's something about full service in particular that makes dating and doing things like that harder because it's so much like the job. And so I wanted a full service sex worker who's a poly person to come on and kind of talk about how you navigate that. So can you tell us like what poly looks like for you and also like how long you've been in that? And then we can kind of get into the broader questions about it.
Yeah. So I've been non-monogamous pretty much my whole adult life. I had one very short-lived monogamous experiment. But my non-monogamy has really evolved and changed over the years. So I've basically been non-monogamous for like, let's say 16, 17 years.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's really evolved over that until I've arrived now at kind of the form of it that really suits me. Which is solo poly, which means that I may date and have relationships, but I don't really want to like escalate a relationship with someone like towards marriage or children or living together. And then I also really prefer, I call it like the term I think specifically is non-hierarchical, but I call it less hierarchical because I'm like, there's just hierarchies inherent in like everything, So basically that means that people that I might be interested in dating don't have like a spouse or a primary partner that they like prioritize over their other relationships. At least that's what they want to do. Everyone has like I said, everyone has kind of natural hierarchies in their lives that they should respect sometimes.
So for you, I guess I want to ask, like, for you, do you feel like somebody being in like a primary relationship is somebody that you would steer clear of having a relationship with? Do you feel like you want your partners to not have those sorts of hierarchical?
Yeah. So if I was looking to date someone beyond something casually, I wouldn't date someone who had a primary relationship because
Mm-hmm.
we would just be wanting two totally different relationship styles. If I'm interested in something a little more casual, that's totally
Yeah.
doable for me.
Yeah.
But because my personal time desires are very low, and I'm like, I don't want to be secondary,
Mm-hmm.
just because I'm like, I want to hang out like once a week or once every 2 weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
part of the reason why I have those needs is because I'm relating to people in this way all the time through my work,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, so let's talk
Yeah.
about a little bit about that. But before we dive into that, I want to ask you, I'm thinking about this and listening to you, and I'm wondering, like, what is like, because there's a way, and I know that everybody negotiates this differently, but there might be a way that somebody who is in a primary relationship, because you have low, like, because you don't want to get together all the time and you don't want them to move into your house, that would feel good in some ways. Is there like a reason besides like the logistics that it feels like that's not good for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's ways that like a hierarchical framework, it's like I'll use examples of
Mm-hmm.
situations that I've been in, like wanting to make plans with someone, but they have to like ask permission to someone else
Mm.
before making
Mm-hmm.
plans, and that doesn't feel good for me. Or like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of other situations. It just has to, or like the availability of like emotional support, or the
Yeah.
availability of like, and so the other people that I date do like a similar relationship model to me. And I've
Mm-hmm.
dated people who have partners of like 7, 8 years, but they're doing a similar way
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
to me. So it's more compatible in that way.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've been like non-monogamous for longer than you've been a full service sex worker. Did you find
Yeah.
that when you got into that kind of work, where I mean, part of escorting, at least like in the way that I do it, is like going out on a lot of dates and maintaining, in a girlfriend and I don't know what kind of work you do, but in like a girlfriend experience context, like carrying on like long-term habitual relationships with people. And for me, that um I feel like in a lot of ways that meets kind of some of that desire that I have for those like dates and long-term relationships, even though they're work and they're in this context of work. And so I was wondering how you manage that or navigate that, and if it changed at all when you changed the types of works you did.
Yeah, definitely. That it definitely takes up very much that dating space. I also offer
Mm-hmm.
GFE. I go out with people on like fun dates. It's really
Mm-hmm.
great.
It is really great.
I really enjoy it, to be honest.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And yeah, it does take up that space for me and energy in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, what was the second part of your
Yeah,
question?
so I guess I was just wondering, like, if when you started doing that kind of dating work, if that changed how you felt about being a not a solo poly person.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So before I was doing this, I think that what I wanted was solo poly, but it was kind of like the language didn't exactly exist back then in the same way
Mm-hmm.
that it does
Yeah.
now. And so I think I was trying to do a more normative, like escalator relationship, but it wasn't really feeling good for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I'm not sure why. And so then when I started to do sex work, I was just like, well, this is just it for me. I'm just gonna do this. And I didn't date um for basically the first, maybe 3 or 4 years that I did it, because I was like, well, this is what I'm gonna do now. Because it felt so great. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I've discovered like the secret to my life or something.
Yeah.
And I was having so much fun and it was amazing. And then I think after the pandemic, I was like, well, maybe like some balance is good.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because we haven't really like defined this yet, but like I love this this notion of like an escalator model of like relationships and maybe like escalating or de-escalating relationships. Because I think that there's this way, especially in our culture, of like pushing, like you get into a relationship and then you move up these like steps until you are at like the height of relationship, which is whatever, married with kids, or which is what our like culture tells us that we're supposed to do. And it's interesting because I found in my work that I've had really similar experiences to you where like clients, because that's so ingrained in like how we're taught to think about relationships, are like, I just wish we could have more, or that the relationship could evolve beyond this. And my thought is always like, wait, why do you want that? Like, this is so great, why would we ruin this with like the laundry? Like, I'm not sure like what that would add to this, and I think that I had that same experience where I was like, wow, this is so nice to be able to like enter into these intimate interactions and then move out of them and move in and out of them like fluidly without having to escalate them into something else.
Yeah, totally. It's really, really sweet. And, in this situation, in my work, both people are bringing their best selves to the table.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
We know there's a few ones who maybe don't out there, but most people are bringing their best selves to the table. And, it's really, really sweet. But yeah, it wasn't until after I came back to dating after the pandemic where I had the language and realized that, like I think what I want to do is this like solo poly thing.
So what is that? Yeah. What do you feel like? So you said that after the pandemic, you wanted some balance. Like, what does the balance like look like for you, and how do your solo poly relationships feel different, or what do they bring to you that like your client interactions don't bring you?
I think that it's, in my work, I am myself. But I'm like I was saying, I'm like the best parts of myself. And I think in a more personal relationship, I'm that, and I'm also like, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm not my best
not
self.
In the mood.
I like forgot. Yeah, I'm not in the mood. I forgot to like brush my teeth. Do you have an extra toothbrush? I forgot. It's like a little bit more. There's a little bit more room for like the fullness of everything that I am. And then also it's like a way, people can like meet my family, or like people can like meet my friends that aren't also sex workers.
Right.
People can like, there's like a little, they can come to my house. There's like a little bit more fullness. To the experience.
Yeah. I assume that. I was just curious, like for you, what your experiences are like and how you differentiate those things.
Yeah. And also, I mean, what you're saying is like, oh, I'm not in the mood. It is really a big one. Like if I've been like working a lot, I can be like, let's just watch a movie. Stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that works less well with clients who are paying for you to be in the mood.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
Yeah. Have you found that like for the most part, it's been fairly compatible? Like, have you found partners that are, that work well with your lifestyle?
Yeah, so I mainly date people who are also trying to do a solo poly thing and who are also trying to do a less hierarchical thing. It's like for sure a filter. But you
Yeah.
know, I live in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people doing a
Yeah.
non-monogamy thing over here.
Yeah.
It's for sure a filter, but also I consider filters like a good thing. Making the pool for dating, you know, making the pool smaller is not a bad thing. It's a filter, and because I don't want to date someone who's not compatible with me. I don't want to date someone that wants to get married and have children because they will feel very sad when I continue to not want to do that. You know?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also for them.
But
yeah,
exactly. And so, but yeah, I have definitely met over the years as I've honed in on what I've wanted, I feel like I've actually met more people because I know what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's that seems like so important. Like going into any relationship or any relationship structure, like knowing what it is that you want out of it and what you can give and what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? What type are you also poly?
This is so complicated.
Okay.
So I am married, and we were always like casually like non-monogamous, and a year and a half ago they got into a relationship that they're still in that was more serious than like any of the other ones, and wanted to kind of rethink about our relationship in light of that, speaking about like hierarchy and you know what that means. And we are married and we do have a kid, and for me that was actually really hard because like I wanted a hierarchical relationship and had a really hard time like imagining like, okay, we're living together and we have a house and we have a kid, but now suddenly like those 10 years are the same as the same. But it took me a long time, I think, to kind of conceptualize like non-hierarchical doesn't mean it's the same, and I think that, it means that we like care for all of the people that we're in a relationship with, and can prioritize those relationships. And so that was something that took me some time to like wrap my head around. And I think, just like laying my cards on the table, I think that part of it for me is that like that I didn't that I was more resistant to that is because I have, a life partner. And then I also negotiate all of these relationships at work, and then thinking of coming up with like another way and other relationships that I'm like negotiating just didn't actually sound appealing to me. I was like, I can't do that. I'm like spent. Like I don't have any more energy for anyone else. But we actually, are in the middle of a like separation. And part of that is, I mean, we're still living in the same house, but the separation part of that is trying to figure out, and this is why like I really liked what you said, like on not just together, but on like an individual level, like what is it that we want out of this relationship? What do we want out of relationships with other people? And how do we navigate across like differences? Because I think that that's also important, because different, like just because you're in a partnership with somebody at whatever level or, doesn't necessarily mean that you want the same thing that they want in the relationship and also like outside of the relationship. And so I think that, I'm doing a lot of thinking through like um, what I want and need and what like they want and need, and how to either decide to get back together and allow ourselves to just have both of what we want, or decide that we want different things. And that's a hard process to go through, but I also think that super important to take like a step back and be like, are we still on the same page? And what does that look like? So the answer to your question is like, am I poly? I don't really know. I'm not
Yeah,
practicing poly,
yeah,
except that I do have a poly partner. And
yeah,
that's an interesting thing too, to have like a poly partner, but not strongly identify with being poly and have to think about, okay, so what does that mean for me? When We're Not Hustling is powered by Black Venom Digital. Black Venom Digital is a collaboration between myself and industry veteran Mr. Black Venom. Black Venom Digital aims to provide adult professionals and entrepreneurs with professional grade web design, graphic design, and branding services that will inspire growth and success. At Black Venom Digital, we empower companions, creators, and entertainers with professional web design and branding. If you're looking for a new website or any other branding services and you work in the adult industry, please find out more at blackvenomdigital.com. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to your podcast. Doing so will help others find us. And if you're a sex worker who wants to come on the show and talk about your life outside of work, we would love to have you. Please send us an email with more information to nothustlingpod@proton.me.
yeah, totally. Thanks for sharing all that. I could totally see how starting in one way and then trying to make a shift to like another way would be really kind of jarring or stressful or
Yeah, and it's
something.
actually
Yeah.
interesting. So Jessica Fern, the one who wrote like Polysecure, have you
Yeah.
read that?
I have read that. That's actually where I was like, oh, I think I'm solo poly. That's the
Yeah.
word I've been looking for. Yeah.
I mean, she does a
Yeah.
lot of work to talk about this, but in the next book that she wrote, which was called, I can't remember, Poly something else, like one of the things that she talked about in there is that sometimes the move from monogamous to non-monogamous is not even as big as the like jump from like one type of non-monogamy to another type of non-monogamy, because it's like there that you have to really like hit up against like how do both people within a relationship think about what a relationship is. And those are, it's one thing to say we want to be able to have the freedom to have other sorts of sexual experiences, and it's another thing to say, okay, I actually think that like I don't want to do hierarchical poly, or like I want to make space for another person in our life or in my life, or and trying to figure out how to do that in a way that's not harmful to other people, the other people that are involved, and I there's so much talk
Totally.
about like within poly about couple privilege, and that's actually one of the reasons I was asking you like if that's a hard line for you. And I think that there is something, it is really difficult. That's a hard thing to navigate, because I think it's really difficult. And I think it's important for anyone to say like anyone else who's involved with one or both of us like deserves as much like regard and respect. And then it's hard to also not want to be like, but I've been here doing all of this for 10 years. Like I want to have some sort of a say, but that some sort of a say can also like be very controlling. And so it's a hard thing to navigate.
Totally. And I think it's really hard just from like a societal perspective. Like society has encouraged like marriage and like family units, like, between marriage between two people and like this way. And our whole society is like set up to prioritize that arrangement.
Right.
And so it's just like, it's really, I think it's really a challenge in so many levels, emotional for sure, but also like financial in a family way to do like a non-monogamy, not saying non-hierarchically.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that you were saying that, you didn't want to be second in a relationship, which is totally reasonable, because I felt that way as like a one-time, like as a primary partner at first. Like I want to be first. I don't want to come second to somebody else. And it took me a long time, which included reading the books that we're talking about, to think like, actually the way that this is being talked about has so much to do with how we've been like trained to think about relationships. And there's not like a first and second. There's different kinds of relationships, and it takes a lot of like work, I think, to undo some of that kind of competitive, at least for me. Like, I'll be vulnerable and say that it took work for me to undo some of that like cultural programming.
Totally. I think it's really challenging. I think that so like the times when I've struggled with that have been when I've been in relationships with people who said that they wanted that they were doing a non-hierarchical thing, but then,
Yeah.
they were trying to do it, but they weren't actually really doing it. And then that makes me feel insecure because I'm like, oh, you're like prioritizing this other person, and you're like asking them if you can make plans with me, or you're like I don't know, doing all these things. That's like for some reason the only example I can think of, but there's lots of other ways.
It's actually a good example because it's like, do you have the autonomy to be in a relationship with me, or is it contingent on somebody else's feelings? And
right. And so those are the times when I felt insecure. But when I've been with people who are like, I've been doing it this way, I have these partners, but then I feel that they're doing the thing, I feel less, I feel more secure because I'm like, oh, we're all doing the thing pretty much, Of course, there's always little things, but yeah.
I think that it's a lot to think about because I think that the hard thing about poly or any form of non-monogamy, but that it could also be like the beautiful thing about it too, is that we don't have these like default scripts anymore. And so we have to like think about how we're going to go about navigating that and how we're going to communicate what we want. Because if you're going into, dating as a single person in a mononormative like framework, you're thinking like, okay, we know where this is going to go. We're either going to break up or we're going to like escalate this to marriage and presumably to kids, but like, or to some sort of long-term monogamous relationship, right? And there's very set rules about what it means to, and people play with those in different ways, right? But there's like more or less like rules about what those kind of relationships look like. And there's not rules for what kind of relationships, like how things look and how things should be. And I think that's sometimes scary, but also sometimes really like the neat part about it too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's what I really like about it. And when I found out, like in college, I think that you could do that. I was like, oh my God, I think my life is like saved. Yeah.
Do you remember as a young person being stressed about the idea of monogamy?
For sure. I remember being like, oh God, like I'm gonna have to get married someday. Like that's gonna suck. Or something. Like as a pretty young child, I can remember dreading it.
Yeah.
And yeah. I forgot my other train of thought, but yeah.
But yeah. So what was your first how did you get introduced to it in college then?
There was some kind of event that was a fake poly wedding to like bring awareness to
really? At your college, like
fact
sponsored by your college?
Polyamory. No. It was like, some people put it on that not sponsored by the college. To like bring awareness to like the idea of polyamory.
That's neat.
Yeah. I have only the vaguest memories of it at this point because that was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
But I remember being like, I was like, that's weird, but also kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, I was like, I think that's the thing I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your first like non-monogamous relationship like? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Let's see. My first non-monogamous relationship. Well, so actually, when I was in college, this is a spicy story.
Yeah.
When I was in college, I had a boyfriend who he had another girlfriend, but he was cheating on her because he lived in another place, and he had like, I was the college girlfriend and she was like the home girlfriend. And she didn't know, but I knew about her. But my first one where everybody knew was probably in my early 20s. You know, there was drama. It was like early 20s non-monogamy, like, but it was really sweet and it was really fun and it was really freeing to be like, I can do this thing and make the rules as we go along. Yeah.
I remember my very first non-monogamous experience, and I was older because I got married to my first husband when I was young, and when we were in our very early 30s, he was like saying like, we've never, we got together so young, we've been together a long time, I would love to like see, like, basically I would like to open the relationship up. And I was like, no, we can't do that, that's crazy. And because I had never thought about it until he, like, I can be monogamous fairly easily, I think, but like but I could also not be too. So like I don't have a strong identity as like either way, and so I was like, no, we can't do that. And then later I was like, well, I don't know, maybe we can do that, and we started to have these like conversations about it. And then he found like a couple on probably like Swing Lifestyle or something like that who wanted to get together for like just a dinner. And he was like, just give them a chance and we don't have to do like anything. And I was like, okay, I'll talk to these people. But it was mostly like I went thinking I was going to have like a educational session. Like I was going to ask them how they were navigating their life and things like that. And they were both so beautiful and interesting and smart. And because I told my husband, like, okay, I'll go, but like, I'm not going to like engage at all. I just want to chat. And he's like, okay, that's fine. And then like she was they were musicians. She was a singer, a very like famous, not famous, but like successful singer, and he was a pianist and a, musical director, and they were just interesting. And he said something that was like, kind of made me pitter pattery. And I went to the bath, and I didn't expect that because I was never open to that before. Cause I was like, I'm married, I'm not into this. Then I went into the bathroom, and we had cell phones at the time, and I texted my husband and was like, okay, it's fine. We can go. This is fine. I'm into it. And like, I surprised myself by saying like, yeah, this is like exciting. And then we ended up going home with them that night and like swapping. And this was more in like a swinger context, but from many years ago, 15 years ago, and swapping. And then I remember the next morning, I'm like, but we're back at home. I'm making pancakes. It's like Sunday morning. And I'm like, everything is the same, except it's not. And it felt like so freeing. Like we just opened the whole world up. It was so exciting.
No, that's great.
Yeah. And we ended up
sounds really sweet.
It was. And we ended up being like really close to them for a year after that. But then they moved. But for like, we kind of developed this relationship that ended up changing my life. Also, it was like the first woman I had ever been with. And, it really changed a lot for me and opened me up to things that I hadn't even really thought about before.
Yay. That sounds very successful first experience.
Yeah, it was. And then I had, not so great experiences, but there was something so cool about like the first experience being such great chemistry between everybody. That was like a stroke of luck.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. There can be so much like joy, I think. There can be so much joy in these like non-conventional, non-traditional relationships that be them like in your personal life or in your work life. And I think that we could always all of us can always feel grateful for like any kind of emotional connection that we have.
Totally. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, like, have you dated like as a sex worker in your relationship, or?
I have, and it doesn't go very well for me. Like part of it, I've tried a couple of times and I've realized that, and I don't know, maybe now that we're separated, it will feel different. I'm not sure. But like, I find that it's hard for me because also, I mean, and part of this conversation for me should be that I'm also an introvert that needs like a lot of time to myself to like regroup and have the space to get back into any sort of social interaction, not just like a romantic or dating one. And so I think that I can get easily overwhelmed by the idea of having like my expectations of things at home, and then like also at work, and then also like, oh damn, now I also have to make time for this other person, which I want to do, but it's hard for me. And I think maybe it's because and I think I explained this on a different episode, but I think for me, and maybe I want to think some more about this actually, is that it was hard for me to think about, okay, I have this way of relating with clients that's like very open and vulnerable, but very contained. And then I have a way of relating to my partner, which is also open and vulnerable and not contained at all. And then like, what would a third way be of connecting with like people that I date, and trying to figure out like where all of those boundaries were. And every time I tried, I found myself not knowing how I wanted to relate to the people that I was dating to, and then like pulling out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It can be kind of a lot. I'm also pretty introverted.
I think a lot of escorts are actually.
Yeah.
We're like, we want to deal with one person at a time for our whole career. Like, that's it.
Yeah. Totally. I feel very yeah, so I could totally understand feeling overwhelmed by like, oh, it's now another person that I have to relate to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember especially like feeling, even just with texting, like having my text go off and be like, oh my gosh, if I had to tell another person how my day was, like I can't go, it just makes me feel bad, because it makes me feel like I shouldn't feel resentful for people asking me how my day is, because that's just a nice thing to do. But when I start to feel that, I realize like I'm over capacity for how many relationships I can manage, when I'm like, I just told somebody else how my day was. I can't tell you how my day was.
Totally. Yeah.
Like, it's always
Relatable.
banal stuff like that. It's never like, do I have enough sexual energy, or do I like, it's always like, my phone is going off again and I can't handle it. I don't want to respond, or those like, I just had like, or people, I write a weekly column, for example, and like different people from different parts of my life, either my clients or my friends or my partner or whatever, saying, oh, what are you writing about this week? And I'm like, I can't, just read it. I can't explain to all of you individually what I'm writing about, and I think I just felt kind of this term that we use, like polysaturated, but in a not really poly way, just in a relationship saturated way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Sometimes when I feel that way, like, oh God, I can't possibly like respond to this person right now or whatever, I just remind myself like, yeah, I spend all of my time relating to other people, and like I need some time to not do that. So then I'm just like, it's okay to like not respond to this text for like 6 hours. It's totally fine.
Yeah. I'm like, I do this really weird thing, or I don't think it's weird actually, but like I am like a relationship TV junkie. Like, I love Love is Blind and 90 Day Fiance and like Married at First Sight. And like, that's my escapism. And you would think it wouldn't be, because I'm like, all I do is relate to people about like love and romance and sex. And you would think that would get tiring, but I like to escape into like somebody else's relationships that I don't have to be a part of.
Yeah, it's like drama that is not happening to you.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that you could just passively take in, that you don't like, I don't have to respond to any of it. I could just passively watch it and be like, I'm lying in my bed and not dealing with the world, and they're doing these things for me. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
It was funny because I talked to a couples therapist who said that she also loves watching those. And she's like, people sometimes ask me, like, is it hard to watch it because you're thinking like, well, if they were in my therapy, I would say X, Y, and Z. And she's like, yeah, I do that, except I don't actually have to therapize them. So like, it's great.
Oh, great. So you can just enjoy it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was curious if you've come across in your dating like poly people that are kind of like not that cool with sex work.
I haven't, but I'll tell you what some of my fears were, and I think this is like like I think this might be like an internalized, I wouldn't say internalized whorephobia, but maybe just like living for so many years under stigma that makes me like hyper vigilant about this stuff, is that I felt like worried, especially like in the kind of polycule that I've been in, that if like when we're having like safety talks and things like that, that if anyone within the polycule were to like come down with some sort of STI, that like suspicions would be more on me, even though I know that like my practices are safer than like probably anyone else there, And so I think that I've been lucky insofar as I like haven't dealt with that, but I've had my own anxiety about, but also like nothing like that has happened, And so I think that I have these anxieties that like it would be easy to scapegoat me if things went south. And that may be irrational, but I don't know that it is. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah. I've definitely had maybe more experiences like chatting to someone on a dating app where they're like either fetishizing it or they're kind of asking like how does that work questions, but they're kind of like offensive questions.
Yeah.
Like but luckily I haven't really, in this kind of more recent iteration of dating, I haven't really met people who were like really whorephobic or not okay with it.
Yeah.
In my personal life, I have had a little maybe weirdness, kind of like similar to what you're saying around sexual health, but that's more in the past for sure. Like when I was figuring things out.
What I will say is like in friend groups with poly people who are not also sex workers, I've run into like latent whorephobia that they didn't like. I'm not dating anyone, but they forget that I'm a sex worker and I'm there, and they'll be telling stories, and like whorephobia will come out in the stories. And like for example, one time I was at a event that everybody there was poly, and somebody was telling a story about how she got in a conflict with her boyfriend's mother about like their poly situation, and she's telling the story and she's like, yeah, and my mother-in-law or whatever she is to her, like called me a whore, and everybody in the group was like, oh. And I was like, wait, really? You guys think that's like the worst thing that she could have said? Like,
oh my God.
As the resident whore in the room, thanks. Thanks for making me feel like you're not me, And so like I've run into things like that. But and I think that happened, those kind of like microaggressions, I think happen a lot, but I haven't had that with actual people I was dating.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I've had a similar way with that. Because I think if someone gets to the point of meeting me in person for dating or like getting into a relationship, then I screen them pretty heavily for that stuff, or I try to.
Yeah. And I should also say that like with my partner, like my work has never really been, that's never been part of our conflicts, you know, and I really appreciate that because I know a lot of people do
Yeah.
struggle with that, but I haven't had that. I've had a lot of support and like love in my life, and that's also very lucky.
Yay. I'm happy to
Yeah.
hear that. I love that. Same here.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is probably, unless you have something that you feel like we didn't cover that you would love to say about this, it's probably a good place to wrap up. But is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think is important when thinking about like poly and sex?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground.
We did.
It was really lovely to talk to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't expect to talk about me, but I appreciate, you know, you turning the tables and being like, "What's your story?" Because that doesn't often happen, and it was kind of it started to. I think it was neat to like connect on our different experiences.
Yeah, totally. I really liked kind of comparing and contrasting and seeing what was different and what was similar.
Yeah. Okay, so I end every episode with 3 questions. So the first one is, what are you reading?
Right now I'm reading a book about astrology because
what sign are you?
I'm a Virgo.
Okay.
That's my sun sign.
Yeah.
I'm taking an online class about psychological astrology.
Nice. You're on the opposite end of me. I'm a Pisces.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Love it.
And what are you listening? Oh, what's the name of the book?
I wish I could remember. It's like something basic, like aspects in astrology or something, but I cannot remember.
Okay, no
it's
worries.
kind of generic. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
What are you listening to? Either podcasts or music, or what do you like to listen to?
Okay, so I have a guilty pleasure podcast, which is Reddit on Wiki, where they're just like reading crap from Reddit and like judging it, kind of. It's kind of like what you were saying with like the reality TV shows. It's so fun though. It's just like totally mindless. Like when I'm driving, it's like kind of funny. It's just like
I didn't even know that exists. That sounds fun.
Yeah, it's actually a whole genre of podcast. Yeah.
That's cool. And what are you excited about?
Oh, so many things. Let's see. I'm really excited. I've been making you know what? I'm really excited about Blue Sky.
Oh, I know. That's suddenly popping.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And I've been making a lot of changes to my website. I added a blog recently.
Nice.
I recently restarted my newsletter, and I'm really excited about all of those things because it's kind of like I get to put myself out there on my terms.
Yeah. It's kind of nice to start. It almost feels like a fresh start. And also it kind of equalizes everything. Like everybody's starting over. So there aren't people with like 500,000 bot accounts that bloats everything.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, totally. Yes.
Okay, so where can people find you, including Blue Sky?
Okay, so on Blue Sky, I'm Delphine. That's my username, which I'm like, ooh, that feels like special. So it's just Delphine. At Delphine
.bluesky.social. Yeah.
I'm on Twitter. It's Delphine_X_. My website is yourmusedelphine.com.
Oh, that's a good handle.
Thank you. Where else am I? I think that's pretty much it. Anywhere else that I am, you can certainly find on my website.
Nice. Okay, it was really lovely talking to you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of When We're Not Hustling. I'm your host, Jessie Sage. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at sapiotextual, or visit my website at jessiesage.com. You can follow the show on all socials at Not Hustling Pod, and visit our website for more information at nothustling.com. The show is produced by Emily Foster. The music is by Benjamin J. Benamati. Signing off. Have a great week.